Vish, last night's game?
Yeah,
Didn't watch it.
outstanding. Outstanding. I think also it might have been, I suppose a final nail in the coffin for those holding on to away goals is something that we maybe lost too soon, and I was one of those people, but. Yeah, brilliant. I wondered, because Luke, you made that shout in the WhatsApp group quite early that this is the best two-legged tie we've seen, and it's hard to disagree, actually.
I couldn't think of any others, but my memory's notoriously poor. Marcus might better step in and kind of...
over two legs, you said, or specifically this tie?
You got the classic remontada, I guess.
But that was one-way traffic the first game, and the second leg was pretty incredible. But I suppose this is good of just like... Yeah. This was more of a boxing thing, wasn't it? It was just, two separate big fights that both delivered. And I think the really cool thing I thought was I didn't see Inter pulling this off. I didn't think Inter could live with Barcelona's attacking verve. And in a way that played out because of the number of goals they conceded. But I totally didn't anticipate they would have the character and the tools to be able to go toe-to-toe with them and eventually, essentially, over both ties, score one more goal than them.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the goals and the distribution of the goals suggest more equality than there actually was in the tie. Because when you were talking about like great ties of the past, and like the remontada is quite a good example because it's one-way traffic. And honestly, I know the remontada is a huge thing in European football history, but it displeases me just how scruffy that second leg was. And some of the refereeing as well, and the way that PSG completely lose it. And I suppose if you go to the remontada, the year afterwards...
where Rome beat them on away goals?
Yeah, the first leg is totally unremarkable. It only becomes remarkable in the second leg and probably quite deep into the second half of the second leg. Whereas this game, this tie is happening from the very first minute when Marcus Thuram scores that goal, and it just doesn't let up. That's right. So it's not about... I don't think it's about competitive balance. I don't think it's about the goals. I just think it's about the extraordinary intensity the whole way. Now, that intensity kind of lets off a little bit in the first half of this second leg, because I think this second leg is pleasing in a very different way to how the first leg was, I think, to be perfectly honest.
I think when people listen to this, I get your point. When people listen to this, will think of you watching this game, because you're such a professional, Andy, and such an expert in European football. I think people will find it hard to imagine you being pleased. Did it please you watching this game? Were you pleased? Were you sitting there like, I'm pleased?
Why do you think he wouldn't be pleased?
Because he's a professional. He's analysing.
I mean, you're holding back from saying pleasured, aren't you?
He's like Tom Cruise in Minority Report when he's watching them.
Yeah, but he's watching murders in Minority Report.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
Well, there was a couple of murders, last night.
Thanks for not saying Alec Baldwin in Sliver. I appreciate
it. You can't mention Alec Baldwin these days, mate.
No.
You can't, very much, you cannot mention it. Look, I also think the nature
Besides,
of this...
it was William, wasn't it?
This game, might have been.
Let's move on.
Doesn't matter.
Loved him in 30 Rock.
What was also interesting about this leg, particularly, is you had. So you talk about with these other games you're talking about comebacks, really.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Even when Liverpool got through against Roma in 2018, they lose the first leg heavy, then they win 5-2 in the second.
It was always Liverpool's game.
Yeah. The end bits are cosmetic, aren't they? Yeah.
This game was a comeback within the game, the one leg, and then another comeback, and then a twist as well. Like, so that was just in the one game.
This is the greatest one.
I think
I agree. And if we're talking about the tension being perfect all the way through, it's funny because Inter gave away a 2-0 lead in both of those games. When they're 2-0 up, they never feel comfortable. And I don't feel comfortable using the phrase gave away either. Because it was funny. I heard like the commentary team yesterday on Amazon going, I think it was Wayne Rooney afterwards going, yeah, well, they look comfortable at 2-0 at half-time. And I was like, did they? Because to me, it felt like
off Wazza.
It felt like Barcelona were a better team in that first half.
Yeah,
and Inter managed to play it quite smartly and with quite a bit of luck. But I think you can convince yourself that all the times they gave away the ball in their own half in the second half, it was just fatigue. I think just the intensity of Barcelona was higher, so they were in a better place to take advantage of that. Because honestly, the amount of daft times Inter gave away the ball in their own half in the first half, but it wasn't taken advantage of, was incredible.
Can I also add that when they were 2-0 up, Inter, my thought was, can they get through this game just on vibes, right?
Yeah.
Because Barcelona, we know when it comes to scoring goals, are a machine. I mean, the goals they've scored this season in all competition is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And you wonder whether they can stand up to it just on vibes alone, because they seem to be channeling a lot of the vibes at the San Siro last night.
Yeah.
And it turns out somehow, by hook or by crook, one way or another, they were able to get through just on vibes alone.
Yeah, and to back that up, in La Liga in 34 games this season, 91 goals.
Yeah.
With Real Madrid,
it's 160 something in all competitions.
It's remarkable. Real Madrid are second in the league with 69 goals having been scored. So that backs up your point. A lot of chat was about Barcelona, and obviously with Lamine Yamal becoming the superstar. Well, I mean, he's already been a superstar since the Euros, you would say.
I think he's going up a level. I think you can say that.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So
certainly in terms of status.
Yeah. So you know, as he becomes possibly the best player in the world, a lot of the attention was on him and their front line. And I think a lot of people expected Barcelona to go through, and that's fine. But they didn't win the first leg. This is the thing that kind of baffled me. You know, Inter have been pretty good in the Champions League this season, and before a ball was kicked in the competition, I remember David Cartledge in this very studio said he fancied Inter for the competition, and as a few people were saying, there's not some, you know, he's not. It's not a backing of Bodo Glimt for the Europa League. You know, a few people were saying that. I remember going, I like that. That seems pretty good. And there was, as the competition went through, Inter was showing they were streetwise, they were canny. Against Barcelona, when they concede 3 goals, they have a few sloppy results in Serie A. They go out of the Coppa Italia, and Nicky Bandini was saying on the continent that there was talk of a treble, whatever one may think of that, and then suddenly it's like, blimey, you might do.
They might have cooked their entire season
completely. Yeah. And you talk about the vibes, Luke. Well, as you said, when they go 2-0 up last night, it's like, bloody hell, what a position. When they're pegged back and Rafinha scores that goal, you just think, oh my goodness,
and
their
you know
season
what?
has collapsed.
Yeah,
but the vibes came through, and that spirit. You look at the stadium after. I've said before. Before this time, I thought they would beat PSG 1-0 in the final. I think they'll go on and win it. Whoever they face.
Well, we'll see. I mean, PSG have still got a job to do yet.
Money on the table.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, that's what we like about you, Marcus. You always flaunt your wealth.
I've put all my silvers out on the table.
Part of my take about the vibes is partly because I was seeing, I kept seeing Inter fans waving Real Madrid flags, celebrating goals, which was amazing. But you're right to point out that Rafinha thing, because in many ways that particular incident, I think, perhaps sums up how Inter were able to get through, because Jan Sommer was amazing.
Man of the match. I mean, that's 7 goals scored.
Yeah,
he's man of the match.
The save he makes right at the very end is one of the best saves I've ever seen in the context. He's one of the world's best goalkeepers, has been for years and years.
Yeah.
36 years young as well.
But the Rafinha incident is interesting because Rafinha gets the ball on his left foot and he strikes the ball at a nice height for Sommer, and Sommer will be really disappointed, the level of goalkeeper he is, that he parries it straight back to Rafinha, because obviously every coach would have told him he needs to parry it somewhere else. Rafinha doesn't miss a beat, strikes it with his other foot, it goes in the corner, and you think, is that going to be the moment? And it will be really harsh on Sommer because he's been so good, yet he stands up to save after save before and after that, doesn't let it affect him, including that last save at the end. There was a save before that where Barcelona go through, it's quite sloppy from Inter, and someone makes another brilliant save, and I think one of the guys on the WhatsApp was saying, is that going to be the turning point?
Where they've got the 3-on-2, which is the one position you expect, the one attacking position that you don't expect Barcelona to have against Inter.
Well, and then the astonishing thing about that, and what you mentioned or alluded to in the first half, is that it seemed clear over and over again that all Inter were going to, I mean, say all they're going to do, it's obviously important to get it right and it's effective. They were very, very happy Barcelona playing such a high line. They were very happy to go over and over again, try and spring that trap and not getting disheartened if they got caught offside, right? They eventually do spring it. They score 2 goals. They find themselves, I think, 3-2 up at the time, and they've got 2 people back defending against 3 Barcelona attackers on the break, and Sommer has to make that save. And if I would be thinking, can you not play, at least in a slightly different way, and understand that you've got a lead here that you could... I'm not saying you sink back and play a real low block and try and protect it at all costs and do a backs against the wall thing, but you could do a bit more than...
That would have suited them better.
Yeah.
Because they looked exhausted. They looked exhausted after like 70, 75 minutes. I mean, when Çalhanoğlu, who is one of the best midfield players in the world, even if he does say it himself...
He does say it himself regularly.
When he came off, he looked like that bloke in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the lid comes off the ark. He was just, he couldn't move.
Yeah.
And that's where they were. And then you look at...
And they started with Henrik Mkhitaryan.
And then you look at... well, he comes off at the same time, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then you look at, as you say, Sommer gets done just for that Rafinha goal, which is a brilliant finish, actually, the rebound finish.
Yeah, it is.
And the one guy on the pitch older than him goes, right, I'm going to take this into my own hands.
That's right.
And a Cherby who probably still wakes up some days thinking, God, I'm playing for a Champions League team. Because this is a guy who's 37 years old. He's come back from cancer. And he's just had this extraordinary
alcoholism
30s to his career. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And starts the game in the middle of a three, of course, he's a centre half. And finishes like he's been playing up front all his life.
Yeah.
A glorious goal.
It's a brilliant goal.
But that's what, I mean, I love that. I think that, and again, that's the chaos factor of this match, is you talk about systems, you talk about all the rest of it, formations, da-da-da-da. It's like, we need something.
Are you saying Italian Harry Maguire?
That's what I'm saying.
I think I
mean, somehow there's a lot of threads in here to essentially develop a dig at Man United as well, because you've got the Mkhitaryan thing.
Yeah.
He's been
and Arsenal as well.
He's been playing the Champions League. Yeah, but it's Man United's funny.
Yeah,
he's going to be playing in the Champions League final after what United signed him for 30 million, then what gave him to Arsenal as part of a swap deal for Alexis Sanchez.
Darmian.
Well, not only that, the big one though for me is
Arnautovic.
That's another interesting one.
The big story is Arnautovic is back in the Champions League final.
Yeah, of course it is.
Having protested it, not protested in a meaningful way, but certainly a lot of people were anti his signing when Manchester United were linked with him.
Including
myself.
But can I interest anyone in the proper dig at Man United, which is into selling Andre Onana for 50 million and signing Jan Sommer for 5 million?
Not bad.
I mean, it's absolutely remarkable.
But they got to the Champions League final with Onana in goal.
I know they did. To be fair, they did. Yeah, they did.
And made pure profit on him. After having him for a year.
But amazing. Going back to Davide Frattesi, his quote when he was asked about his winning goal, which was a lovely one as well. When I got the ball, I was thinking, if I don't score, I'm fucked. Which I think it's maybe been a touch harsh on himself, but it needed a bit of composure to score a game. It was, the old adage, it was either going to be a bit of quality or a mistake in a game like that. And I'm glad it was a bit of quality.
He's a funny one, Frattesi, because he is a player who was really coveted when he left Sassuolo. A lot of other clubs are interested in him. He's been coveted since, despite never really playing that much for Inter. Now, he's quite a prolific scorer of vital goals, particularly at that stadium where he scored the ones for Italy to get past Ukraine, for example. And it's weird because they don't seem to put that much confidence in him. They clearly rate him. So he started, I think, 9 games in Serie A last season. He's already still played more minutes than he did last season. And yet, when people were asking him about him in January, you had Roma asking about him, you had Spurs asking about him, some others. And why wouldn't you? Because he's a guy who's a guarantee of goals from midfield. They were like, all right, 60 million, let's see it. And it's like 60 million for a guy that you don't trust to be in your team. I find that remarkable. But I guess this was a call to mind about how he can just pop up and do something like that at that moment. I loved how he celebrated it as well. Like people celebrated Serie A goals in the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
Get up that fence. Get up that fence.
San Siro's conducive for that as well.
And where are all these? I can see some of those are subs, but where are all these people coming from?
But when you talk about the vibes, even with the first goal, Martinez scored. The subs were on.
They were so pumped.
Yeah.
They were. I think Vish, you said in the WhatsApp group, I think if somebody scores another goal, they're going to blast off to the moon. It was a celebration-heavy game.
There's Bezos again.
I think I was trying to sneak in there, actually.
They're probably passing Lautaro a couple of paracetamol because he looked really uncomfortable by the end of it. And they asked him afterwards, and he said he sat at home and cried for 2 days with his injury. And he just he's pushed himself out there, and he says he hopes he's fit for the final.
And that's sad.
Well, see Thuram as well. His hamstring was very heavily strapped at the end there, yeah.
And you feel for Martinez, even though he is Argentinian, to hear that.
I was going to say, an Argentinian striker, he's a double-hard bastard, isn't he?
Yeah, but if you look at an Argentinian striker and see he's crying for 2 days, you're automatically thinking that's some kind of trick. Yeah. That's a trick. That's a ploy. That's going to come back and bite us somehow. I don't know how, but that's going to be egg on our face at some point.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I honestly think him and Julian Alvarez haven't had a day off. In about 2 years.
That's the thing about Martinez, isn't it? Because he is absolutely relentless. He's the natural heir to a Carlos Tevez, really. He's always on the move. Whenever you think of him, he's always on the move. I'm not comparing him as a player to Tevez.
But in fairness, I never seen Tevez play 78 games in a season.
No, I guess not.
As well.
The one of my favourite players who ends up obviously having an incredible part in all this. And he's my favourite player because I don't really understand him because of his stature and the position he plays and the fact that he's clearly a little bit clumsy for someone operating at that level. Dumfries. When you consider the risk, quote unquote, that Inter took on him, given that I remember when he goes to the Euros,
in 2020 Euros,
and there's all this talk of he's really athletic, blah blah blah. And a lot of doubts about his football. And I think, Andy, it might have been you or someone else of your ilk, i.e. someone who knows what they're talking about, saying that he's a risk.
Do you think it's name bias?
Could be.
Because his name's Denzel Dumfries?
Yeah.
He's got dumb in there.
Yeah.
Oh, but Denzel's a good name, though.
Denzel is a good name, but his surname has the word dumb in it.
But he's got Denzel in it and fries.
Vish.
Two of my favourite things.
Yes.
Vish. His surname has the name dumb in it.
Yeah.
Respond to that.
Yeah, it's subconscious.
It is.
Yeah.
Subconscious name bias.
I was trying to think of other, there's no one else. If he was Frattesi, would Spurs have spent 60
Put him on the other flank.
Yeah.
Evens itself out.
Yeah, I mean, if it was
Cleverson, that's why Manchester United bought him.
That's right, yeah.
Didn't work out. But
Denzel supersized fries, you'd probably be all right with that.
all over that, yeah.
World record transfer.
But it's mad to think that he's in a game, with all those goals, he's been responsible for 5 of them. Yeah. Scored 3 assists.
It's worth pointing out that I was just reading this now from a Dutch outlet that's been translated here, but saying that growing up, Dumfries said he was determined to make it as a professional footballer, which he was ridiculed for and mocked by his peers at the time due to his lack of technical skills. So, there's a narrative there. There's a narrative
because no one really pulls the cord until he has the Euros in 2021, and then it's Inter.
Yeah.
And you'd be able to tell us, Ali, but has it been smooth sailing? I feel like it's been
not always. That they would have sold him nearly every transfer window if they could have done.
What's a damning indictment?
Well, not everyone.
No, because you
just said nearly.
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
not as bad as one might think.
I think
every transfer window. Come on.
Part of that as well. I think it's because of his athleticism makes them think we can sell him to a Premier League club as well. And I suspect they will be able to sell him to a Premier League club in the very near future, and perhaps that's what they'll end up doing this summer. But what amazes me when we talk about, and Vish, you're talking about how much he relies on his athletic gifts. That first game in which he was phenomenal, he hadn't started for a month. He'd been injured.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He pulls out a performance like that it shouldn't be possible. It's kind of like, Thiago Silva back in the day when you think he hadn't trained for 6 weeks and he can just, all right, it's Champions League night. I'm going to pull out a performance tonight. And it'll be fine.
Generational talent, though, Thiago Silva. Generationally talented.
And of course, a very different style of playing.
Yeah,
but I think
Dumfries is back.
This is what the beauty of football is. I feel like that Inter were the better team across these 2 legs for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
maybe. And that's the beauty of it, that Barcelona, I don't think really could have done much more. But Inter...
So that's the canniness getting them through then, though, Andy.
Partly plan, partly luck, partly just being able to grab onto the floor with your fingernails and ride out the difficult bits, and they get there.
But that's the thing, though, with this Inter side, there is an essence of a kind of classic Italian side here. In that, against Bayern in that first leg, how they get out of there with a 2-1 win, but they do. And look at this game. We're talking about Barcelona again with that attacking talent. Yamal's phenomenal. Everyone's talking about blah 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 blah, but they get over the line, and that it bodes very very well for them.
Yamal's performance for a player who didn't assist or score a goal last night it's amazing how good he still seemed. You know, it's like that kind of electrifying nature whenever he gets the ball. I know he hit the post and beat
a few inches other side, and then this is a very different conversation.
Generally speaking, the players who play that well on a big occasion do tend to make a contribution in that way.
Yeah.
I think I know we've got to go, but very quickly, what I always want to say on these kind of events is that so much about football these days is about how managers and players can control situations, and they're looking to try and reduce the amount of variables as much as possible. That's really what Guardiola's doing.
Is that why Inzaghi was out of his technical area so much?
Might be, but because managers don't want to see that game. Managers don't want to see that happening, right? But without question, invariably, whenever we see an amazing game, it's because things can't be controlled, and that's what the beauty of football is.
Yes.
So no matter how often managers and players and people in the game try and control things to make it conducive to them winning, the fans like us love when it can't be controlled, and that's what makes football so good. And last night was a great example of that.
Damn right. Coming up after this, Trent Alexander-Arnold bids farewell to his boyhood club. We're going on tour, everybody. The Football Ramble time tunnel is coming to a city near you. Glasgow, Newcastle, Birmingham, Manchester and London between the 9th of May and the 17th of May. Click on the link that's just appeared in the top right-hand corner of this video and get your tickets. Don't delay. Get one today.
And in towards Garcia. Nicely. Pedri. Gerard Martin. Cutting it back for Garcia. Save from Sommer. Where did he come from? Forever in a day. This is beautiful football by Barcelona.
Welcome back to the Football Ramble, everybody. Commentators reacting to Jan Sommer's save against Eric Garcia last night. And what a save it was. Now then, domestic matters. Trent Alexander-Arnold will be leaving Liverpool come the summer. Now, we mentioned this very briefly at the end of Monday's show because it was breaking news as we were about to finish. But a lot of people have had their say since then, of course.
But have we had our say with sad piano music?
No, we haven't, Andy. No, we haven't.
Or the music from Eminem's Stan. Which will be good, I think.
Yes.
I think every single...
Or that UB40 song, There's a rat in the kitchen, what am I gonna do? There's a rat. So he's gone for the lolly, not the loyalty, Andy. He's won 9 trophies, made 352 appearances for Liverpool. His boyhood club...
That screams disloyalty, doesn't it?
It does, Andy. On the announcement, Jamie Carragher said he will lose something in terms of Liverpool supporters' love for him. Do you think is a fair comment? Because that's clearly...
Yeah, that's true.
What's happened.
That's up to them.
Him being one of their own will diminish. This is something he has sacrificed. So I think that's fair comment. Carragher also said he doesn't think Liverpool is enough. And that's where I thought, I'm not sure.
So that's a perspective from a Liverpudlian, right? Who's very proud to be from Liverpool, and I understand that, and that's a different perspective to what maybe we would have. But my take on it, I suppose, just to get it out there, get the ball rolling, if you like. Is that like the ball that you have those hamsters you put in? But it's I think.
So are you getting in the? Are you getting in the hamster ball?
I've put the rat in the hamster. It's a rat ball, and it's a conversational hamster ball with a rat in it. It's going all around the studio.
So you pass it
Can we
to
all
each
just
other
get together and get some sawdust for Luke?
The conversation stopped when
I'm
the ball...
sucking at one of those water bottles that's attached to the side of the studio.
When the ball eventually gets to Madrid, then the stalking stops.
What if the rat jumps into a bigger ball?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, that's possibly what he is doing.
Yeah.
Liverpool fans don't agree with that. But my take is just that it all comes down to one question, really, and because the rest of it's detail, which I'll come on to. But the question is, do you think it's reasonable, and I'm not loading this question anymore, I'm just trying to present it factually. Do you think it's reasonable that a football player who has been at a club since they were 6 or 7 years old, who is now in their mid-20s, so given 20 years service to the club, do you think it's a reasonable decision for him to make to say, I would like to play for another club?
No.
Right? And if your answer to that is, on a human level, particularly when you take into account Real Madrid, which is probably where he's going to go, if you think that's acceptable and it's reasonable and fair enough for him to want to do that, then I don't really know what else he could have done because if he's not going to sign a contract because he doesn't want to stay there, and that's his decision. If he comes out and says I'm leaving in December when this chat started, he's going to get absolute dog's abuse. You're derailing our title bid. How could you undermine us when we're trying to go for our first Premier League title for however long since COVID? How can you do this? How can you do that? He's kept his powder dry and he's given what he can give, and he's given his performances, and he's made a contribution to winning the title, and he's done it the only way he can do it. I just don't understand how you can criticise him unless you think it's completely unreasonable that he wants to move clubs full stop, which I think is a really weird viewpoint.
We don't know. We think it's Real Madrid. Well, would you be? But what if he goes to Man United?
That's a different kettle of fish entirely. You know it is. You know it is.
It'd be funny though, wouldn't it?
I mean, well, yeah. I mean, in one level, all this is quite funny to me.
Just trying to think how long it would take to ruin him.
Yeah.
Probably 18 months. He is really good. Need a lot of work.
As many as 18.
That's a lot of lunches in hallways.
No, I get what you're saying. Bollocks aside, I get what you're saying.
He's won everything. I just think, as a human being who's worked so hard to be a football player and who's won everything he can win at Liverpool, it's not unreasonable to think that he wants a new challenge. Now, I understand Liverpool fans think Liverpool is the centre of the universe when it comes to football, and you don't need to go anywhere else, and you can be a legend and all the rest of it. But ultimately, when it comes to getting up at the crack of dawn and working really hard and making those sacrifices and coming back from injuries and dealing with all the shit he gets, sometimes from us and the general media, that's on him. He has to wear that, right? So when he's dealing with all that criticism, when he has a poor performance, or like I say, he's battling really hard to come back from injury, he has to deal with that. He's earned the right to make a decision about his own career. He just has.
I agree with you, and I think that if he went to another Premier League club, which he's almost certainly not, he's not going to.
I don't think he would do that out of principle.
I don't think he would do that out of principle as well. That would be a strange and odd move. If he went to Man City, I can understand people going, what on earth are you doing? He's not just moving club, he's moving country. It's a totally different thing. And for somebody to say, I want to experience something completely different, I think all bets are off. If you move country, I think that's fair game, really. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that...
I don't know, if he goes to Saudi...
No, come on.
I know what you mean.
I do know what you mean.
Andy? Okay, fair enough. I was talking...
No, I know what you mean.
But I think that's it, because he's not... It's not just money that he's, that it's not money he's moving for. He's
not chosen an easy option at all.
No, exactly, Andy.
At all.
And I think that's it. That you're moving to a club which you're unlikely to play Liverpool, certainly often. Yeah, they might meet in the Champions League or something like that. But I mean, come on. I agree with you, Luke. He's put an enormous shift in. I understand some fans are angry that he's going to leave on a free, but let's be realistic here. He signed that contract that the club offered him. It's up to him what he does with that. If he suddenly went, do you know what? I don't want to be a footballer anymore. So after this contract, I'm going to quit and I'm going to do something else. You'd think, that's a bit of a strange... You might feel it's a bit of a shame and you're a bit sad because you want to see his talent. That conviction I get.
Well, I'll tell you what,
But to kick off and say, well, hang on a minute, you should do this, that and the other. I understand it's a bit of a sickener. I think that's more on the club.
Also, I agree it is on the club, but you don't want to be Kane or Zaha either.
Yes,
exactly. And
Bayern have saved Kane.
Yes, we have to
from his brother.
He's not allowed in anymore.
Yeah, he's not giving you a visa. We basically
we're moving back to the Olympia Stadion, Charlie. We'll see you there on Saturday.
Yeah, right.
The whole of Brexit was just to get Harry Kane away from his brother. We do not want Charlie Kane to have freedom of movement in Europe. That is a deal breaker for us. He's on all the posters.
Yeah.
But I think with Liverpool, you're right, Marcus. You have to go back a couple of years, and Liverpool were not always in the position, even going back a couple of years, to necessarily satisfy all his sporting desires. They weren't in that position. You go back 3 years, and FSG are maybe looking at selling the club as well. For that reason, and because they get through a couple of sporting directors, so obviously Michael Edwards goes, Julian Ward comes in and goes, Jürgen Schmacker is there for a little bit, just as a kind of favour to help Jürgen Klopp, and then Edwards comes back in this sort of oversight role, which I presume will really help Liverpool going into the transfer window this summer. It feels like they dropped the ball a little bit, because to let it get to this point, to let him get a player of that value to get into the last 2 years, 18 months of his contract, that's an oversight by the club. And they didn't make a decision, and they didn't make him make a decision as well. So for him to be at this point where he's run out of contract, the idea that that's simply Trent being Machiavellian is ridiculous. It's frankly ridiculous. So I think you look at that, you look at the fact that you don't really know where Liverpool are going in the last bit of Klopp. Post-Klopp, you can never imagine that this year is going to happen. You don't know, if you're Trent Alexander-Arnold, what the possibilities are, what Liverpool can actually offer you. And it seems that Liverpool didn't actually offer him everything he wanted. And you're right, it might have been that they could have offered him the earth and he would have still said no. But it does feel that someone has taken their eye off the ball somewhere along the line. And if he's taken this opportunity to make the choice that he wants to make, fine. Because you know what, like we were saying before, it's not an easy decision. Oh, yeah, every time he has a below par game at Real Madrid, he is going to get absolutely slayed by the press. And look, if we know one thing about him, he's an exceptional player. But there will be a few defensive lapses along the line, particularly if you bear in mind that if he plays at right back, which we assume he will because he won't be getting into that midfield, he will be succeeding Dani Carvajal, who is one of the most reliable, combative defenders, and really the exact opposite to Trent Alexander-Arnold, even if he did chip in with that goal in the Champions League final and he puts one away here and there. It's a departure, and it's a brave one. It's brave for Real Madrid, and it's brave for Alexander-Arnold as well.
Vish, what do you think of the stuff about the idea that he perhaps won't be seen as a Liverpool legend? You know, the stuff that Carragher was saying, he'll lose something in terms of the Liverpool supporters' love for him being one of their own. That will sort of slightly diminish. They used to think he's the Scouser in our team. You know, they loved him for that. They love one of their own, perhaps more than anybody else in the country. You know, there's such an affinity with local lads in that side. There are in other clubs, but I think maybe in Liverpool it's more. From that kind of angle, what do you think about all those kind of comments?
Well, I think the fact that he is local was used in some part against him by the Liverpool management. And I don't mean slight, I mean the people in charge of essentially handing out these contracts. Because, and they've done this before with local players, it's been written about in the past, but they almost use the pressure from Liverpool, the city, as an extra bargaining tool when they're working out these contracts with some of their local players. It's not a surprise that actually, you know, the highest earners at Liverpool, by and large, have been foreign players. Yeah. And obviously that's to do with, you know, the stock of certain players, and attacking players generally get paid more, blah, blah, blah. But that's not a coincidence. I said this outside when we were gearing up for this show. You know, I don't think Trent Alexander-Arnold is a rat at all. I do almost have a little bit of envy with, you know, Liverpool fans and that attachment that they feel so wronged that Alexander-Arnold is leaving, because it comes from a good place. The thing
right, a real love for one of their players.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that kind of attachment is not to be sniffed at. At the same time, you rarely see, you know, the shine of that attachment. We merely see the dark side, which is, you know, people just constantly laying into him, saying some quite unsavoury things about him and the people he associates with and stuff like that. At the same time, you know, it's hard not to fall down on the side that Andy comes at here, in that they did drop the ball a bit. If they really wanted to keep him, this should have been, they should have made a bigger play for him beforehand. It does speak to a level of mismanagement that they kind of got away with Mo Salah. They kind of got away with Van Dijk. They did need to see how those two players in particular did, you know, certainly at this stage of their career, in terms of how this current season has panned out. They didn't need to see it with Alexander-Arnold. They know they've got a totem of their club there. They should have really thrown money at him and, you know, thrown a bit more affection his way to get him to
make him feel the most important.
It is possible that he wasn't for the turning.
Yeah, but that's the point. Vish and Andy make these points, and they are valid points, and there's all the good, interesting detail around it. But the two things I'd say is, like, one, as you've just ended by saying, that may not have made any difference whatsoever, because Alexander-Arnold may just want to.
Yeah, we weren't privy to those conversations. Yeah,
and secondly, those things you're talking about there aren't the reason why Liverpool fans are annoyed. And Liverpool fans aren't prepared at the moment, and possibly ever, to even entertain the idea that it could be their own club's fault that he's gone. That it's a pretty binary thing for them. You either love Liverpool and you stay, or you don't and you don't. And if you don't and you don't, they're going to treat you in a certain way. Now, I've got no judgment call to make on it. It's nothing to do with me. But from where I'm looking, I think you've got to be pretty hard-hearted to to deny him his own personal ambition after what he's sacrificed as a player to get to where he's got to, particularly after he's dedicated himself for so long and won everything that is possible to win at the club. And the other context I would just add is, if you support Liverpool, you're pretty fortunate. And I'll tell you why you're pretty fortunate, because you've got an amazing history as arguably the biggest club in the country, with an incredible narrative and a myth around it and everything you can buy into. And the lineage is just absolutely clear. And you're seduced into, by and large, thinking, probably rightly, that, your players don't tend to move to other clubs for a bigger move. And the thing that hurts is because it's being perceived as a bigger move, right? If you support Portsmouth or FC Wimbledon or Fulham,
right?
This happens.
Tom Kearney's
by the way,
anyway.
Guys, this happens to you all. This happens to you all the fucking time.
Of course it does.
Portsmouth, the amount of times Portsmouth had a good player, and you're sitting there thinking this is great, but I don't want it to be too good, because we're going to lose him.
Yeah. Well, the amount of times they've had a shit player and he's gone to AFC Wimbledon and been really good.
I don't mind that so much. But the point just being, it's impossible to ask people to have perspective, because they're not going to, because it's an emotional thing, and I understand that. And I'm not criticising fans. I mean, Liverpool fans are going to kick off.
It's a unique situation.
Whatever we say. But it's not a unique situation, is it? It's to him, I suppose it's unique. But this stuff can happen. And I just find it difficult to understand why you would be so annoyed. Why you can't be a bit like, I don't know, be a bit more like when a player leaves, thanks very much for everything you've done. Maybe it's because in 2020 when they won the league he was the only Scouser, maybe. I don't know.
I think
maybe it's something to do
the fact is, as I mentioned
because
earlier,
football's different now. You don't have homegrown players as often, right? So
I think it's a rare thing that they could genuinely say, he's the Scouser in our team, and it was a chant that they loved singing to him. He loved receiving it and so on. But I don't think this move invalidates that. Because again, much has been made about that they're not going to get a fee for him. Again, that's a bit like people who voted for Brexit saying, I was really bothered about trade deals. I don't think they're thinking about the fees and all that kind of money stuff. And I think that...
You think it's cover for unreasonableness?
Charlie Kane, isn't it?
Yeah, back to him again. No, I do think a bit of that. I think that's kind of chucked out there. Someone says that and they go, oh yeah, that's a reason to really kick off.
Right, okay.
That would be my
sophistry, maybe.
Yeah, that would be my take on that. But to me, it makes more sense that you would leave after your contract. If he leaves mid-contract, that to me is saying, oh yeah,
I've not honoured the contract.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, to spin it that
I'll
way.
go in January.
Yeah. So
that's what I was saying earlier. If he announces that he wants to leave in December, January, he's going to get absolutely hammered.
And I think
he's announced it after they've won the league.
Exactly.
That's what I mean, Vish. I think he signed off wonderfully well. He scored the winner at Leicester and it had his celebration, which was, I think, was great for him to have that moment towards the end of his Liverpool career. I think
we said that after that game as well, that it was a cool thing to be able to do and actually have quite a pure in life moment with the fans, because those are so rare. The thing I will say about, I think you're spot on there in terms of the reaction towards Alexander-Arnold and the fact that some of it is disingenuous in terms of the reasonings why that they should have this visceral reaction to him. I do get where it comes from, and I think we all get where it comes from as we've articulated. And I think this is just that early stage of what is essentially grief, isn't it?
Yeah. It's gutting. It's a sickener. I think
this was always going to happen as soon as he agreed to make Charlie Kane his agent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but I think as well, I think that the only thing I would actually say is that Carragher saying that he sacrificed becoming a proper bona fide legend in the same way that Carragher would be seen, or Gerrard or whatever.
I think that is. I think that is true.
Yes,
and I think.
To me, though,
I think Carragher might have been framing that in a dismissive way of what Trent's done. But again, I think that comes from someone who didn't do that. Yep. And to be fair to Carragher, has stated, look, he didn't really have the choice.
No one offered me. No one came from
me. He said that. He's open with that.
And Carragher is someone who's very, very interested in European football, knows it all, loves, has got great affections, came out of international retirement to play for Capello, because he loved that Milan side. So I think he would be someone, ironically, if he was offered, might be tempted by it because he's that kind of character.
Yeah.
But Steven Gerrard has said that he was really tempted to go to, was it Chelsea and Mourinho?
Chelsea was
really
tempted.
that could have gone
all sorts of stuff about that potential Chelsea move that we can't talk about on here. isn't it? That's basically the rumours are the rumours, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, look, we're going to get hammered in the comments. People will call us absolute wankers, particularly as 4 of us are Southerners on the show today, so that's going to be part of it as well.
Andy lives up north now.
He does, actually. To be fair, Andy, do you want to make your representation as a Northern ambassador?
Come on. You're further north than
Andy
Liverpool.
was saying to me before, since he's moved to Newcastle, he's really been able to understand what it's like to be a Scouser.
Yeah.
I think if we direct your feedback towards him.
If we weren't going to get hammered, we are now. Something though,
just looking to see where we're doing our live shows.
Yeah,
something.
Well, what I would say, I know you want to move on, just to end. It's okay. We don't need to worry too much because Liverpoolians have got a famous sense of humour, so they'll be fine about it.
That's true.
What are you doing?
They have. They say they have.
Like, we'll take them at their word.
Yeah, I'm just believing them.
Fucking
Get
hell.
Jimmy Tarbuck involved.
Yeah, get them all in. What's Silla up to?
If I just undermined the last 10 minutes of quite good chat.
Look, something we can all get behind is the fact that Real Madrid want to sign him in time for the Club World Cup.
You know what they thought? Look, we've seen the reaction to your fans. We can line your palms with a bit of silver. How does 250 grand sound?
How do you fancy summer in the US away from all that?
Because the first match is on the 18th of June. His contract doesn't end until 30th of June. Can we get a little 2-week fee? A little something?
Yeah.
A little sweetener?
That'd be
As
nice.
Vish said,
It's a little
$250,000.
It's a little bit like if you were trying to jump the queue in the Ivy and you went, allow me, and reached into your pocket and put a £1 coin in the bouncer's hand.
£1 coin.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There we are. Coming up after this, Arsenal's date with destiny. Right then, Champions League is back tonight. So soon after the last semi-final, we've got another one, Andy.
I know, but these two teams are boring as hell.
Oh,
PSG, I wouldn't call boring.
Yeah,
Vish is jealous. He's jealous, isn't he?
Oh, we press. Don't press.
Vish,
Be pressed. Let it wash over you.
You get nostalgic for Solskjaer's Man United that dispatched PSG.
Yeah, I think he is.
And what a dispatching that was.
Yeah. Even Solskjaer himself was absolutely stunned that he possibly pulled that off.
How are we talking about this now? Give it back to Arsenal PSG.
This is what you should have started.
It's going to be a fascinating game today.
Vish, I was at Arsenal on Saturday. I've got no desire to talk about him again.
Well, Luis Enrique said that PSG are bound to suffer against Arsenal. Declan Rice has said Arsenal will need big balls and magic moments to reach the final.
Never use those two words in the same sentence. Get your balls out. They're massive. Is that a magic moment for you? Seeing my big balls? There's no way Declan Rice's balls are massive. The amount of runs he makes.
Channel the spirit of AC/DC.
You know those like sheep they use to inseminate all the female sheep at the farm, and they've got a massive pair of nuts.
Yeah, well, they'd have to.
And they can't barely walk because the nuts are so big.
Yeah.
And if you not see it, look it up. Declan Rice,
do look it up.
When you're at home,
on someone else's computer,
not on your work computer.
Incognito mode.
Yeah.
There's no way Declan Rice can have balls that big the way he does all those runs.
No, he can't do.
I mean, he's like the Energizer Bunny.
Maybe that's it.
He famously got no balls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Thomas Partey will surely return after a suspension that ruled them out of the first leg, which is a boost for Arsenal.
100%.
It is a
if
boost.
only because it pushes old Decky further up the pitch.
That's right.
It makes a massive difference. And I said on OTC actually last week, and if you look at the situations in which PSG have conceded goals, and if you think their clean sheet of the Emirates was their first for a while, and after they kind of got knocked off course at Villa Park, in that game away at Aston Villa, and in the subsequent games where they concede goals to far less good teams like Le Havre and Nantes, all the players who scored, they're all advanced midfielders who they don't pick up. Because as beautiful as they are to watch PSG, as industrious as they are off the ball, and it's feverish the way they work to get the ball
I love
back.
that feverish.
They don't have this dedicated defensive midfielder, do they? And that clearly makes a difference, because if you had, I don't know, whether it's Manuel Ugarte, who is not anywhere near as good on the ball as any of them guys, but he's very much either I'm going to tackle you, or if you get past me, I'm going to knock you over. I think you look at the guys like Morgan Sanson, who had that spell at Aston Villa that didn't really quite work out. He scores twice against PSG at the Parc des Princes when I went 10 days ago or whatever. that is a spot for Declan Rice
you've got
and Arsenal to aim at.
So Partey being back and releasing Declan Rice could be key tonight in the game.
Totally, for those late runs in the box.
Yeah, but surely Martin Odegaard is the man you're looking at, and he's not been on form of late.
You're looking for him to make the pass for Rice, aren't you?
Which they did against Bournemouth, which is exactly what happened against Bournemouth.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
But it depends how you interpret the performance against Bournemouth, in my view. I mean, because Thomas Partey was poor against Bournemouth, and it's not like he's been injured for ages. He had a suspension.
It felt like it was. I mean, you were there, but it felt like the first half. So okay, we've scored. That'll do.
If you're looking at this in retrospect, in 2 months' time, and Arsenal have won the Champions League, well, you're never going to think about that Bournemouth game again.
No.
But if it's a feature rather than a bug, then they're going to get crucified tonight.
Well, as I said, I wouldn't. Maybe with hindsight I wouldn't put too much into that, because I think again for what I saw, it seemed like first half it was like, well, we're 1-0 up, we're okay, we're on top kind of thing.
I felt
Second
like the players, Marcus, I felt like the players just didn't want to get injured and miss the biggest.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. The second half, that's what we saw.
Like the game was like a total inconvenience for Arsenal.
Yeah.
It's like when you go and see like an indie band in the 90s and Sultans of Ping are second support, isn't it? Really?
Sultans of Ping.
Great shout.
And you've just got to stand there and suck it up.
That's the first mention of Sultans of Ping of the year for me.
Really?
Andy,
please hear that. Yeah.
I can't think of who Sultans of Ping are.
Where's my jumper?
Yeah, Where's Me Jumper's a classic. The Sultans of Ping, they're kind of like the Mac lads, aren't they?
Ooh.
Yeah, I suppose.
Kind of like the Mac lads, but they're Irish.
Yeah.
I don't think it doesn't matter.
No,
I cannot tell you enough how much that doesn't matter.
I cannot tell you how heartbroken I am that I served you up a little 90s reference and you don't get it.
Also, Odegaard needs to be a Sultan of Ping today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Balls and whatnot.
And he's not been at it at all.
No,
Well, we need Martinelli to be a Sultan of Wing.
A Sultan of Ming, hasn't he?
The only player worth a damn in that Bournemouth game was Rice.
Yeah.
He was able to carry on doing what he always does. A poor Arsenal performance overall doesn't seem to affect him, and he's got to grab it by the scruff of the neck and he's got to drag them through it if they're going to perform anywhere near like they performed against Bournemouth. I don't think they will, but the problem with that attitude and thinking, oh yeah, but they'll be better against PSG, is presumably PSG are going to have quite a big say in that.
Yes.
And you need to understand it's not all about Arsenal. Paris Saint-Germain are going to a home leg with a lead. It depends which way you want to look at it. PSG are going to stop Arsenal playing probably, and they're going to give them a lot of threat as well. But on the other hand, Arsenal are one great performance away from the Champions League final, and at the start of the season, you'd be all over them.
No, they're one efficient performance away from the Champions League final.
Well,
I don't think it has to be a great performance.
So this is what I was going to ask you, Andy, because so let's look at the goalkeeper, Donnarumma, who has been, in imperious form. We've seen him, wonderful saves and so. But there was an article on the BBC recently saying which Donnarumma is going to turn up in this game, suggesting that, well, not suggesting, it's saying factually that he'd made errors this season, and
that have cost them matches.
That cost them
against Liverpool, that cost them against Atletico.
Yes.
In a Champions League context.
And some people have been saying that they might actually look to maybe bring in the Lille goalkeeper instead of him.
Lucas Chevalier.
Yeah. And so suddenly you think, oh, hang on a minute, this guy, I think, certainly in this country, partially because of the Euros and, obviously...
He's a big game goalkeeper.
But he is a big game goalkeeper and he's huge and all the rest of it. This side is not perfect. And I think that we look at certain players and we look at, as I say, Donnarumma and say, well, you can't beat him. Okay, yes, he's pulled out great saves and so on and so forth. But, pressurise him, not great with his feet, blah, 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 blah. I know that I'm kind of grasping at straws a little bit here.
No, I don't think so.
The idea that this tie is done, the idea that Arsenal are not going to get one past him, and the idea that PSG will definitely play Inter in the final, although I did predict earlier that Inter would beat them 1-0 in the final. I think that it is a nonsense. PSG, I have, I'm sure the supercomputers will tell you that PSG are favourites for this. Well, understandably so. They have a lead and home advantage and so on. But I think it's an intriguing tie.
It is. And the most interesting thing about it is PSG can go out there, batter Arsenal and not win the game. And we've seen it on a number of occasions this season. I mean, Luke, you and I saw it at the Parc de France going back to November.
That was
it wasn't a one-off.
Now, though. They're different now.
But it wasn't. But they did it against Nice like 2 weeks ago.
Do Arsenal play like they played against Real Madrid in that second leg? I know Real Madrid cooked and a different proposition and were just floating balls into that Arsenal backline. PSG are not going to do that. But what I mean is, in terms of the discipline and in terms of actually sitting off, Arsenal don't have a lead. I understand that. They don't have a handsome lead like they did, so they could play like that. But Arsenal, it's just one goal. It's just one goal, and the away goals aren't there, as we know. So Arsenal and PSG are not going to sit off Arsenal. They're going to attack. They're going to go on the front foot.
Yeah.
But you have to give them something to worry about. And there are two players. When Luke was talking about and Andy about players from deep, there are two players who can do that for me, who give them something a little extra to worry about. But actually, as stuff to fear, because they're obviously going to worry about Declan Rice. That's a bit of a no-brainer now. It's Odegaard and it's Miles Lewis-Skelly. And you kind of feel like they have to go about it in two very different ways, naturally, because of their position. Odegaard needs to my mind anyway, needs to be in a free role, and he needs to get those PSG midfielders asking amongst themselves, where is he?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Where is he?
Yeah.
What's he doing over there?
Yeah.
Someone get him.
Yeah.
And Miles Lewis-Skelly has to have... he probably has to have the game of his life.
He's going to need to be in two places at the same time.
He needs to basically get that. You've seen it. You saw it a bit at the start of his career, and you see it more now, and it clearly fits him really well.
And at the start of his a few months ago.
Yeah, but a genuine thing where he gets into the opposition half, and he's like, "Oh, it's a bit of open space there. I might go into that." And now, as he did in the Real Madrid game, he's like, "Nah, fuck it, I'm going to go in the box now." He needs to do that. He had a really good through ball to Martinelli's chance in the first leg that Martinelli ends up missing, hitting straight at Donnarumma. He kind of needs to really think, even at his young age, and he definitely has this in him, but he kind of needs to think, yeah, it's on me now. I need to affect this game.
I think what it comes down to is probably that the story of Arsenal's season is that, unfortunately, in the big moments, they've not been reliable, right? And you could say it sounds harsh, the Real Madrid thing and all the rest of it.
But the Real Madrid thing is an outlier, mate.
It is, because it wasn't that Liverpool were flawless Premier League champions. Liverpool have been really good. They deserve to win the title. But you never felt that Arsenal were reliable enough to take advantage of Liverpool dropping points. And I wonder whether they're going to come up short again here tonight, because some of these players you're talking about, Odegaard, when's the last time he's played really well in a big game? He did well against Chelsea when they won 1-0. Did okay against Man United, but they didn't win the game.
I think
other than that, he can knock over Ipswich, as I said on Monday, or whatever it was. He can knock over Ipswich 4-0. He can play a part in that. But you haven't seen anything from him for a while to think that he can do that. It may well be that they can ride a storm that PSG rain down on them, and Saka can do something, or Rice can do something, and it is a 1-0, and it goes to extra time, and all bets are off. It can be that, but I think it's given the players they've got missing as well, Arsenal, which I haven't really mentioned, given that PSG. I take Andy's point about the Atletico game. We were there, but PSG are a better proposition.
But I think the reason why we're trying to sort of talk it up is because you want to, as a neutral, or well, I wouldn't call myself a neutral, as I'd say I always want the English team to win. You want to talk it almost into existence, but also with that Real Madrid victory, I think we weren't expecting it. And Real Madrid were bad, so there's a part of it. Don't get me wrong, but you'd have a reference point that maybe you didn't have under Arteta so much.
Yeah, and it's changed the whole environment of Arsenal's Champions League campaign, because you speak to Arsenal fans before that Real Madrid first leg and they're like, whoa, this is good, isn't it? Exciting to be here. Quarter-final against Real Madrid. Yeah. This feels good. But you might go into this intellectually, you might go into this semi-final going, okay, they're a better side than us, particularly at the moment. They've got better players than us, particularly at the moment, globally speaking. But there is a sense, because you're so close, because you're in the last four, of expectation, and you can do this. And like I said, I think they can do this. I think I'm not saying they definitely will,
of course, yeah.
But there's the possibility for them to do something.
I agree they can. I totally agree they can do it.
Yeah. You got to think of two things here as well that make it extra exciting. This is very new territory for a lot of those PSG players. Yeah. Can't underestimate Mikel Arteta's propensity to do something quite mad.
I hope so. Yeah. I'll be delighted.
Imagine if he, I don't know, drops Odegaard, uses him at half time or something like that. Everything.
What, plays Jorginho?
On the table.
Jorginho's available.
Yeah. Plays himself.
Yeah, he might.
I'll do it.
Come back to the Parc de France, he might do.
Yeah. He knows the club.
Yeah.
He knows the pitch.